So everyone, today what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about what it is to be a bureaucracy lab, to think about, when we say bureaucracy, it's a tongue-in-cheek way of talking about public administration. We are all public servants in one way or another. And so public administration is our world. It's what we do on a daily basis. And the way that we get managed, the way that we recruit colleagues has a very big impact on our experience of life. How good the public policy sphere that I work in, my experience of the public sector that I work in, of which the World Bank is an example, thank you very much, is my lived experience. And so a question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we improve the world in which we work? But then we also have to think about the fact that government has huge impacts on our neighbors, on our children, on our communities, on our country. And therefore, public administration matters for the entirety of our citizens, of the entire of Ghana. And so this course, so if we just go to slide 2, this course is all about asking questions. So can you just go back to the first slide, please? And we're going to do so very much in collaboration, in parallel. So so this is the Bureaucracy Lab course, and I now have control, Adrian, of the slides. The idea is to support, in the same way that you just all asked on that poll that Madam Elizabeth said, how do we actually do analytics of Ghana's public administration to make it better? It's going to be a conversation. We want you to be as involved as us, but it's also virtual. We're all scattered. You're not in the atrium with me. You're not in the coffee shop with me. And so we need you to bring your full self. We need you to come and think hard about these questions and apply them to the work that you do. And we'll help you try and do that. But reach out to us by text, by WhatsApp, reach out to us by email, fill in the polls, bring your full self. You know, I'm going to tell you that I'm someone who spent a lot of time in Nigeria and Ghana, and I'm always very struck by the wisdom there. And in Ghana, there's many phrases that, you know, to kind of touch my heart. And I have to say that there's very few things that can't be encapsulated by the wisdom of a Ghanaian proverb. So you'll see me scatter those through the slides. And the first one is just to say that if you do not ask questions, you are tempting becoming a fool. Our job in life is to question all the time, is to question our soul. Are we doing the right thing? Is to question the extent to which our work is useful, but also to question the fact that even though we're in a hierarchy, even though we're not in the place that we would prefer to be, in terms of the exact quality always of the working environment, what can we do to marginally or even majorly improve the quality of the work environment we're in? So we're going to try and talk to you about 3 major areas of analytics, of understanding, asking questions about our working environment in public administration. The first will be on measuring things. How do you measure well? Because that's the first step towards truthful or objective response, is to understand the reality. But then also, how do you bring that data into a single unified place where you can do analysis? And I know that the OHCS has been thinking about how do you build a data architecture? And then finally, when you have that data in one place, how do you do analysis? And do those analysis such that you actually improve human resources? How do you do what Madam Elizabeth was saying, is to really change the policies of the OHCS and of the public service of Ghana? So that's what we hope to talk about. You've asked us to do lab sessions, class discussions, takeaway homework. We'll do all of them. We want to be responsive to your requests, and we would ask that everyone tries to engage in all of them, because really this is a production that is co-produced. Together we're doing this. And again, a Ghanaian proverb, knowledge is like a baobab tree. No one can encompass it with their hands. So understanding how to do this isn't in my mind. It's not in any of my team's mind, or it's any of yours. Understanding how to do this will come together if we work as a team. So specifically, the request we've received is that the course structure should train participants on the use of programming and analytical tools for effective implementation of research activity. We will do that. We'll have specific trainings on programming tools. We'd like to talk a little bit about what specifically those should be, because I know a lot of people use Excel. There are other ways you can analyze and visualize. One of the poll responses was to visualize. And so let's hear more about what you mean by that. What's the programs that you want to be trained in? But then we have to keep in mind that the course should always be directly linked to HR analytics, because that is the core of what you do. So generally, I want us to ask questions of each other and what we're trying to do in our work. So let me start with my story, which is, for me, I had the choice of going into academia after my PhD or coming to the World Bank. And if my intention was to try and improve the World Bank's delivery of services to its counterparts, my thought was, well, really, the way to change the public sector is to be inside it. So being inside the public sector means that you have the relationships, the understanding of protocols, like you all do with Ghana, that allows you to actually make a difference. And so I decided to come to the bank, because if you want to change the bank, you have to be in the bank. If you want to change Ghana's public service, you have to be inside Ghana's public service. And then you have to think to yourself, well, what are you really trying to do? Because sometimes we have a small place in hierarchy and inside public administration. We're in a unit, we're in a ministry, and above us is a great deal of hierarchy. And yet, it is only those who are inside the public service, always in some small place, taking those first steps, that is going to lead to the big change. So I want us to stop for just 10 seconds. I want you to ask yourself the following question. I'm going to mute. What are you trying to do in your work? What's the point of your work? So now think. Okay. I would be very interested to hear some of your answers. We'll do that one day. So can everyone now hear and see me? Abhishek, can you hear and see me?
Yeah, we can, Dan.
I'm on 2 devices, so it's so how did we get here? So in many ways, you're well equipped to start. So the work I said that we've done with Martin included surveys of Ghana's civil service, working with CSTC on a new training project productivity scheme, trialing new ways of measurement. For example, Alan led a piece of work on trialing how do you measure whether people in the public service are actually adhering to the processes that, say, PRAD outline. We work with PRAD on that as well. And then ongoing engagements with the OHCS. Similarly, the OHCS Bureaucracy Lab has already done a series of pieces of work. Examples are the onboarding cohort study, the second round of civil service response to COVID-19, So that was where we surveyed members of the public service of Ghana on COVID-19. We tried to understand the extent to which the academic trainings that civil service officers had gone on actually had impact. And, you know, we've tried to understand the online and virtual promotions feedback for a survey. But what it is that we've been doing is advising and guiding on each of these as you have taken more and more of the responsibility of doing it. So how did we get here? We became a partnership. So early on, it was a piece of work that Martin, myself, Imran, and others were doing with Jane and Alan and the head of service. But increasingly, OHCS has taken on these activities themselves and started asking questions themselves about what it is they're supposed to be doing. And we have created some of the most unique data in the world in Ghana on how effective the public service is. So Ghana, in some sense, is already a leader in this field. Nana asked the following question. Of all my departments, who is doing what they're supposed to be doing? Who's achieving what they're supposed to be achieving? And so what did we do? We took the annual performance reports and we went and audited, are these a good assessment of what the different departments in Ghana's civil service is doing? And then we coded up how many of the activities. So let me finish this slide and then we'll stop for questions. How many of the activities in the annual performance reports were actually completed? And then we did a lot of validation of that. We saw whether projects from one year to the next were being copied and so forth. And what we got to was this graph. So what you see here is the following. Here's all of the 32 MDAs, organizations, that we studied in the civil service. And those dark blue dots are the average proportion of projects completed by civil service agencies in Ghana. And what you see is that when you use the reports you already have, you get a very stark graph. At the top end, on the right-hand side, we've ranked these so that the best performing organizations, top end, on the right-hand side, they're completing maybe 80, 60% of all the tasks that they're supposed to be undertaking. But if you move down to the left-hand side of the graph, these are the least performing ministries, departments, and agencies inside the Ghanaian civil service. And what you see is that maybe the first 5 are only completing 1 in 5 projects. And we can define this a whole load of different ways. What you see is that there is a large number of MDAs in Ghana who are not performing. And there are those who are performing. But this is what we found even more interesting. Now let's not just think about an MDA, an organization. Let's think about the units inside the MDA. And you can also code to what extent individual units are completing the work that they're supposed to be doing. And what do you see? So we've stacked at each of the solid blue dots in a line vertically the proportion of projects that the units within those organizations have completed. So what do you see is that even in some of the worst performing organizations, you have units that are high performing. They're producing everything they're supposed to be doing. You are also seeing units that are doing very little. Similarly, at the top end, even in the best performing agencies, you have units that are performing high and those that are performing low. So the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why is one unit in an agency having so much more productivity than one who's literally over the corridor? One answer might be management. And so we went and measured management of all the different units and agencies in civil service. And what you see is that, again, lots of variation in how good a manager is managing the unit. But we can think of other reasons. But in the end, the question is, why do we see so much productivity difference inside organizations? Why do we see so much productivity across the civil service? And of course, in the end, this is two graphs that say that Ghana's civil service, there are big questions to ask. There are places to go and improve. And you are working in some of them. There are problems with the quality of management. So the question is, how do we improve them? How do we teach public servants to be better managers? Here is the data showing from your institutions, from where you are working, that there are problems and questions to be asked. Now, there are big things we cannot do. There are big questions we cannot get answers to because we are all civil servants working in a system. Another great proverb from Ghana. Let not what you cannot do tear you from what you can do. The question this course is going to ask you is not, what is it that we're not going to be able to study? What can we not improve? The question is, what can you improve today and tomorrow and next week and next month and beyond? And the nice thing about having worked now for 7 years with your teams and with your colleagues and with some of you is we have answers. The training for productivity, we randomized, so we know its effects, and we see improvements in culture, in management, in the quality of productivity. You can change things in Ghana. So the question is not what we cannot do. The question for the next 8 weeks is what we can. Now, Mr. Samuel had a question, I think, and I will let anyone else come in. So Samuel, please open your mic, ask your question. I apologize, I thought I saw a hand. If anyone has a question, then please come in now. All right, well, hopefully you're all thinking hard about what it is that we can do. So that's what we do at the bank. We ask ourselves, what is it to be a bureaucracy lab? A lab is a place where you try things, you measure things, and mainly you fail to get it right. But when you get it right, you make a difference. And so that's the bank's bureaucracy labs approach. Government is quite rightly conservative. It resists too much change, as it should. We wouldn't want government to be moving too fast. But inside government, people like us, we have to make a choice as to whether we do try and make things better. And so what I did was I came and I sat here in the research unit. That's what's all around me. And I started to work with some of my colleagues in operations. And we built something that has tried to change the way that the administration of governance is done here at the bank. Same with my manager. She came here and she started my unit. And she grew it and grew it. And initially it seemed like an impossible task. But now, literally last week, the bank has told her that she's completely changed the way they're going to do knowledge management. That they're going to start taking the ideas that she had and not just making them part of what our unit does, but making them what the bank as a whole does. She came to the public service. She tried something out. She got a lot wrong, but she also got some things right. and that has changed the administration she works in. So it's the story of a bureaucracy lab, and that's the story I would like you guys to think of as potentially your own story. So in summary, what we're trying to do is to innovate bureaucracy, public administration, through better data and empirics. Why do we think data is such a good way to do it? Well, our approach can always push on the idea that we are scientists, bureaucracy scientists. We can always push on the idea that if a decision is going to be made and a manager is making a decision, let's try and provide that manager with some objective data, not our opinion, some objective data that informs that decision. Much can't be measured, but that which can enables us to make better decisions. The graphs I just showed you said this is the ministry, department, or agency that requires more attention. It's the one that's not performing. Then I showed you those management graphs. This allows us to say to the chief director, some of your managers are not managing well. We need to train them, we need to support them, and maybe we need to actually have a quick talk with them about what they're doing. Without the data, you wouldn't know who are the people whose staff feel that they are not being effectively managed. And so a scientific approach means we're not trying to have arguments. We're not trying to get my opinion over yours, but rather we are trying to support the best decision making of our seniors, trying to make our own decisions better. And so if we start to move away from opinion, subjective, and a little bit more nudge ourselves towards using pictures of reality, photographs of productivity, images of management quality, then what we'll do is we'll start to be able to shift Ghana's service towards a slightly more scientific approach. And this is what all the private sector companies are now doing. When you open your phone and you start to play with Facebook, with Google, with any of the consumer apps like Amazon, you are part of a huge number of experiments. You're part of data collection. They want to make decisions, again, not completely based on the data, but informed by what is the reality of the consumers that they're working with. So why does this matter? Well, it matters to ask questions because what you folks do affects jobs and the economy in Ghana. So who wants to apply for jobs in the public service? Who are we taking out of the talent pool? Who gets them? Everybody who is queuing for a public sector job and not going into the private sector, well, it means Ghana's public service is changing the job market in Ghana as a whole. And we know it happens. All of our friends who want to get a public sector job, who make efforts to get a public sector job, are making choices to try and get into the service instead of getting into the private sector. Even those in the private sector who know they don't want to work, they know they have to pay people enough so that they can draw them away from the public sector. So that means decisions about wages in the public service has meaning for jobs in the rest of the economy. Ghana's government runs a lot of thank you. A lot of the schools in Ghana. So what happens if health or education sector staff are motivated or not? If health staff at the ministry or at the hospital level are unmotivated, do patients get worse service? When we motivate them, do they get better service? So what the OHCS and all of you you're at the pinnacle of a machine that affects the future of Ghana's children. That affects the future of your children. And again, don't think to yourself, I can't have that big an impact. The question is not what you can't do, it's what you can. How do we improve the public service, the public administration in Ghana? Because it doesn't just matter for the jobs and the economy today, it matters for your children's future. It also matters for service delivery as a whole. So the services you and your neighbors get and the communities that you serve. And it matters for your workplace. So if you improve the public service today, then you are improving your workplace in years to come. You have to ask yourself, how are you shaping your future workplace? So the quality of your training, the quality of your management, the quality of your audit, it all is going to change what the public service looks like tomorrow. So how do we answer those questions? We answer them with data. We create global benchmarking data so that any individual public service can compare themselves to another one. We also take payroll data and HRMIS data, and we use it to try and understand the public service better. I'll give you an example. If you watch, some people will move from one unit to another, from one organization to another. The question is, why are they doing that? Is it to do better work? Is it because they have found a way to improve their salaries? Is it a funny part of the system? The HRMIS data, just simply seeing where people are, will allow you to do that. Will allow you to sketch how people move through the public service. So we appreciate that that's not going to give you a full picture, so we survey public officials. So much of the public service is about motivation. It's about a commitment to public service, and that can only be seen when you ask people what their experience of the service is. And then we match that with productivity assessments. But how do you measure productivity in the public service, in the public administration? It's very difficult. We're all working together as a team. We're working on process. Let's measure process. Let's measure the quality of process. Let's measure how much team members actually move files to each other in a timely fashion. And then we experiment. We try things out. In CSTC, we experimented with a new way of training, and it showed that actually taking people off campus to places like CSTC is a better way to train than by trying to embed that training inside the public, inside literally your offices. We didn't know that before. So let's keep trialing things out. So that's how we answer this question. So let me just flesh those out for you, and then we'll go to conversation. So our global benchmarking data is important because it tells you what the rest of the world looks like. Our worlds are so local. My office here is where I spend most of my day, and so I see very little of other public administrations. The US federal government is literally over the road, and I spend almost no time there. So data allows us to answer, what does the rest of the world look like, even in a partial way? And here's another fantastic Ghanaian proverb. It's a child who has never traveled who says that only his mother prepares tasty meals. So when I first got to Ghana, Alan and Jane both knew I'd spent 7 years working in Nigeria. And they said, okay, whose jollof rice is better? And I was like, oh, big question. Big question. You can't answer that and then get away safely, you know? I'm not saying that, I'm not telling you which I think. I think both are delicious. I can tell you that there's no beans in the world better than red. And pineapple, CSTC, those pineapple sellers outside, that's some of the best pineapple in the world. Okay, so Ghana definitely has some of the tastiest meals in the world. Fine, but you have to travel to appreciate that. You have to travel to appreciate that. And it's expensive to travel, it's hard. So going out and searching for international experience allows you at least to look over the fence and understand what your neighbor's doing. And we've done that really focusing on the labor market, focusing on wages. So we use these things called the worldwide bureaucracy indicators. It's It's trying to understand what employment looks like, what the wages look like. We also have created data on public and private labor markets so you can see the differences between the two. And we've also created a set of surveys of public servants where you can see how does Ghana look compared to, say, Brazil or Nigeria or others. So it's this comparative data. I'm not telling you you have to use any of our comparative data. I'm saying when you try to understand yourself, there's something very powerful about traveling through data. By finding whatever it is that you want to know and then going to find data sets that give you some comparative element informs your decision. The question you have to ask yourself is this. When you think about Ghana civil service, who are you comparing to? Is Ghana a good place to work? That's a question. I asked you before, what is it you're trying to do? Is it a good place to do that? But when you think that, who are you comparing to? So I want you to think for one moment. Again, I'm going to mute. When you think about whether Ghana is a good place to be in a civil servant, who are you comparing? Just think for a moment, please. And then, when you've thought about who you're comparing to, how did you get?
I'm hungry.
So what I want, can I just ask to mute? There is one person who isn't muted. And then Adrian, if you just keep an eye on. You have a question? Yes, what I'll do is I'll pause here. If anyone has a question, please come in. Otherwise, I think it is Josh here who's unmuted. So Josh, if you have a question, please come in. All right. And also you can always put questions in the chat. And my team, if anyone does put questions in the chat, please just come in and tell me. All right, so I've been asking, who do you compare Ghana's civil service to? And when you do that, how do you do that? Is it because you did you had experience there, you went there, you've got family there? Is it that you are doing that comparison? Finding data. Please
okay.
Come in.
Yes. This question, in fact, having worked with the head of service for some time now, from some years now, well, I haven't actually experienced any civil service, well, internationally, but I think he has. So almost all the time he would cite, what's the name? Singapore. He would cite Singapore, and I think he visited there and had some interaction, undertook some training there as well. And so sometimes you come out to say, okay, so the Singapore civil service will do it this way, that way. Maybe if you're writing proposals or writing some documents or something, you would ask us to go into the website and find out how to do things there. So yes, Singapore is one country that I've heard, in particular, the head of service citing as an example of, a civil service that Ghana will really want to emulate.
That's a very good choice. Singapore have some very interesting, and I will find there's a researcher who works a lot on describing Singapore, and I will find that and I'll send it round to everyone. So, Madam Elizabeth, that's a good choice. Daniel wants to come in.
Yes, we at MSD have had to, as part of our work, do comparative analysis. You may be working on a sector, you may be working on a ministry or a department, and you want to identify some best practices. And so, as Elizabeth said, we are compelled to go online and search. Sometimes because we have historical connections with some countries, so Commonwealth countries, we would like to, for instance, find out from the Commonwealth countries what is happening in similar departments, if they exist. We also try to look at maybe the sub-region, so ECOWAS. Is there a new trend that we can learn from, successes or even failures, so that it helps us to guide our paths and our choices? And the African sub-region, there could be international obligations, for instance, coming from AU, coming from ECOWAS, coming from the IMF, World Bank. So we try to do this kind of analysis, although on a very limited scale, I must admit, because we can't authenticate what is on the websites for most of these institutions or these countries. And so that is the challenge that we have. Yeah, thank you.
These are fantastic to hear that you are putting that kind of effort in. As homework, we're going to ask everyone to do what Daniel has just suggested. For their own departments, I want you to go and find a specific comparator country. It could be a Commonwealth, it could be Singapore. And I want you to go and investigate for yourself, what is life like? What is the work like for your role or a similar department in another country? Because again, looking over that fence, you better understand your own meals. How my mother makes very good meals in some areas. Her jollof rice, because she's British, does not exist. It's terrible. If she tried to make it, it would taste like risotto. It would be too European. But I only knew that by looking over the fence. So what I want everyone to do is do what Daniel's suggesting. We're going to send around a set of resources that supports that. I like this idea of going to what was called the Commonwealth Public Administration Forum at CAPAM. We'll send some of those. We'll point you to the World Bank. Just because we're speaking, just because of what Madam Elizabeth and Daniel were saying, maybe we can invite a few of our colleagues from other countries, like Singapore or wherever you would prefer, and we can invite them to come and address within the next few weeks this forum. So please keep coming in with your questions. As you can see, I get very excited when you send them. Next, we don't use our HRMIS and payroll data enough. I don't for my lab. I know the World Bank doesn't, and we don't do so in public administration. Now, I know that CSTC only has some HRMIS data. Sometimes it's fragmented, sometimes you have trained, whatever. What you do have is rich. And more, we can give you examples. In fact, we're just writing a book that has some chapters on exactly how do you use your payroll and HRMIS data to say something exciting and interesting. Now, everyone here is working on different data sets. I want you to think about the following. You have some data wherever you work, and you are going to not use it enough, I promise you. So what can you do to capitalize on the data you have? Now, payroll data is exciting because it's to do with the budget. And I can tell you that the work we've been doing in Latin America, when you pick up the payroll data and you start to look at how much it's going to cost if we keep hiring in the same way, if we keep paying pensions in the same way. This is not to say we should reduce pensions. This is not to say we should reduce wages, but we should think about each change. Brazil was going bankrupt. The house was burning. But people were arguing over one small thing or another because they didn't have the data. Our team, along with Daniel Ortega, showed them what was happening. With their data, we used it better, and they restructured who was coming into the service, on what contracts, and in what ways, so that everyone got a fair package, but the house would not be burning. Payroll is very exciting because it's all about budgets, and of course, budgets are what we all care about. But it doesn't just say about budgets today or payroll today. Again, it gives you that whole history. Where did people come in? People who came in certain years, are they still together? Are they still a network? Are they still working together? What's happening to people who are working throughout the different parts of the payroll, different grades of people? Does everyone get to rise through the service in an equal way? Is there equity for all of you? To what extent do women get punished in the way that they do in other sectors and not rising? I can tell you from the worldwide bureaucracy indicators, those comparative data, we see that women all over the world in public service rise to director position and stop. We see very little gender equity in the most senior positions in the public service. The question is, if we show that, if we bring the data, we may not be able to transform it today, but we start a conversation that eventually says it's not right. Women should be at the most senior levels, just like men. And there's many other things that we can talk about. It's all in your HMIS data. It's all in your payroll data. Now, before we go to Stephen's question, let me just finish this section by saying the other thing that's exciting about having HMIS and payroll data is to extrapolate. So you can extrapolate in terms of wages, as we're doing here, and start to say what's going to happen if we pay people more, less, what's going to happen not just to individual salaries, what's going to happen to equity. Often wage changes are just made in a vacuum. In fact, what you should think is, what will this do to equity in the public service in 5-10 years' time? We actually have some very basic code that we can give you that you can use to model this for yourself. We can train you on that. Some of you will be more interested in this. Other people will be more interested, for example, in the training data that you have. What's happened to the composition of your trainees over time? So use your training data. That's your HRMIS data at CSTC, is that you have years and years of training data. And so you can start to use that to model out, well, with the same trends, where are we going to have to start investing in more teaching? We can make strategic decisions. We can start plotting, as I said, who's getting paid more and why. And that's not to say some people shouldn't be paid more. It's asking ourselves whether it's the right thing to do. You know, there is a huge wage gap in the private sector in Ghana. But I can tell you that it's better to be a female in public service because you get paid 90% of what men do versus the private sector where you, for same level of skills, get paid 50% of what men do. And that comes from your payroll data. All right, let's just pause for one moment. Let Stephen come in, and then we're going to ask this question. Stephen? So Stephen, come in whenever you want. Anyone else would like to make a comment or ask a question? Stephen, if you're having any trouble, you can also just chat in the box. Okay. Stephen, if you're having trouble unmuting, I can also just wait, but I'm going to move on, and then as soon as you'd like to come in, please. Stephen, okay. So, you know, one question you might ask around salary raise is, a lot of us feel, I think most people in public service feel that though the package is generally good, sometimes the salary compared to some of our friends is not as high as it could be. So the question is, if we were to raise Ghana's public administration, public service, your salaries by 5%, what would happen? Actually, maybe this is a very competitive thing to do because we can draw in talent, because maybe it will improve the equity. We can move away from allowances. Maybe this is a good thing to do, but it needs analysis. And then if you have analysis, you can make a case. Now, it may be that actually it would be damaging to finances, but you're only able to make that conversation. You're only able to have that conversation if you ask this question, curate your HMIS or payroll data, and then make this analysis something that senior management see. And so the next thing do you see all the time I'm saying to myself, what questions should we be asking? What data can help us answer it? This is something that's obviously dear to all of our hearts, how much we take home as pay. Analysis can help you understand changes in that as well as everything else. I'll try and speed up a little bit because I know some of you have been involved with surveys of public servants. Some of you have been enumerators on the surveys I've been involved with. I know that the Reform Coordination Unit have now running regular surveys, which is commendable. And I want to say, you know, not just Madam Elizabeth, her leadership is, you know, something fantastic. There's not that many countries in the world that do effective surveying of their officials. So just trying is impressive. But we believe this is important, so we've done it in lots of places around the world. We have surveyed now, in fact, these are public administration wide. For COVID related surveys, we've done many more. So we've surveyed probably 40 countries in the world now in some way on their public administrations. And, you know, we don't just ask about pay competitive, we ask about their skills, your skills. We ask about equity, we ask about how you were recruited, management quality, motivation. Surveys can be very focused on particular topics. How are you coping with COVID and telework? What do you need? It can be a track of how satisfied people are over time with their time in the service. But what a survey does is it's a window into the public servant, and we know the public servant is a critical part of public service. So surveys matter. They're very powerful, particularly if they're informed by the analysis. Please mute when you can. We also try to improve the way that we measure the productivity of the public service. I'll give you two examples. One is we go back to budget data and we say, how predictive can budget data be? Well, your annual progress reports tell us which projects completed. Well, then we can look at the disbursements of those projects. And maybe the projects that do complete disperse very heavily early on, or in the second quarter, or there's something interesting in the Ghanaian context that says your projects, Ebenezer, I will come back to the point on females in a moment. Your projects that do complete, which you have data on because I just showed you it, and we know it's in the APR, maybe if you match that up with budget data, in the second quarter, anything that doesn't disperse, we put a red flag over that project. We focus on it. We say, there's a problem here. This project has the same disbursement pattern as those that frequently fail to get completed. You have all this data. It's about putting it together and it's about analyzing it. And anyone who does this for their department, for their organization, or for the budget as a whole is changing the way that government does its work. Stephen, I hope I didn't stop you from speaking. Please come in, because I see you put your hand down. Ebenezer, if you want to come in and ask a question, but let me just go back to that slide in a few moments. Now, this is something we did with Alan, with Jane and others, but also with the wider team we were working with, is we said, well, it's all very well thinking about a single department, but that's not how public service works. Public service works when I finish part of the task and I give it to another unit to take the next step. In fact, a lot of what public service is supporting other units to do their work. So then we ask the question, well, how timely is the inputs of one unit to another? And so we made hundreds of standardized requests from the OHCS office. And we asked, how frequently do we see people presenting a timely input or response? And what you see is that at the deadline, you get lots of people submitting, about 50%. But then you have this long tail of delays. And so the question we ask is, once you have a long series of delays, are there some institutions, some departments that are always delaying, that are always submitting late? Immediately, literally in the ledgers of who's responding when. You have data to show what are the systematically slow departments that are keeping other departments back. The data, again, is already in OHCS. We just have to curate it. Alan, do you want to make any comments on the work you did here or on anything else because you've been involved? I'll take that as a, you've said it all, Dan. All right. So Alan, come in. Jane, come in. Anyone or Benedict, anyone who's worked on this is welcome to jump in. So you've heard me talk about our data on the public service in Ghana. Now another question for you all. Which are the best managed, most motivated, and most productive MDAs in Ghana? Which ones do you think? So just have a think about that for one moment. And the question is, how do you know that? Because that's a very big question. The best managed means you have to have measured all of them. You probably know your unit, you probably know a few others, you've heard what other people say. But isn't this question important? Isn't this a question we should ask? Not to punish anyone, to learn. What are the best managed, most motivated, and most productive MDAs in Ghana? If we find out the 3, 4, 5, 10, we should go and visit them. We should document what they do. We should learn from them. Is it something the chief director is doing? Have they just got good directors? Have they got something magical? Have they got a good culture? Do they have weekend parties together? What's happening? What are the best methods? And why is it that we don't know the answer to that question? Do the APRs give us the answers to this question? They definitely give us a lot more of an answer than most things. So how do we use the APRs to really say, these are some really high performing, and they seem to perform frequently very well. Let's learn from them. Let's go and really investigate what they do well. This is a big question that I want people to take home with them. Which are the best institutions in Ghana civil service? Why? And what should that mean we do with our work, with the way that we work with our colleagues? I want to mention that we also do experiments where we trial different ways of rolling out reforms. Imagine we found the best MDAs all have a very strong culture that comes from a particular way that directors report to their teams. I'm just making that up. Imagine that's true. Then we should try and teach that to other MDAs. But how do we know it's going to work in the other MDAs? We don't tell everyone to do this new thing. We tell half to do this new thing. And then what we can do is we can compare them to the half we didn't and see whether when you trial something new in Ghana's civil service, does it actually make an impact? If we do so in a random way, it's fair. It means that we choose half, really by flipping a coin. But then, because it's random, these two groups, those who did the new thing and those who didn't, are in many ways the same. They look the same. They have the same sort of characteristics. And so we do that because it's a very powerful tool. If you have learned from the data analysis that we just talked about, then what we can do is we can trial things outside of where they've worked and see if we can get them to work elsewhere. That's what we did with CSTC. So in CSTC, we asked the question, is training as effective as it could be? So the first thing we did was we measured people going in and coming out of CSTC training sessions. But, very importantly, we also followed them back into public service and interviewed them a year later and asked them the same questions again. And what we find is very interesting. We wanted to understand experimentally how we could improve the quality of learning. So if you look at the test that they take just after they leave, then people learn a lot at CSTC. It's a very good training center. But to keep that learning a year later, in fact, you need to do something to help them take that learning back into their unit. So what we did was we did a day with them where we said, please think about how you're going to take this back into your service. How are you going to change the culture? How are you going to actually go from CSTC with the learning that you've had and change the way that you actually do work inside your unit? And most people didn't want to do big reforms, small things, process changes, adhering to rules, just change a little bit of what they were doing. People who had that training, they were the ones who kept the learning. So when we went back a year later and interviewed them, so CSTC had the biggest impact when we did this little change to the way, we trialed this little change to the way that learning happened. So CSTC, positive things are happening. And with small changes, we were able to see even more positive things. So I've done this in Ethiopia, where the question they had was, how do we make sure that our public servants have the information they need to do their work? What we found actually was that often people didn't know the numbers of school children if they're an education officer, they didn't know the hectares of land that they were serving in their local government if they were an agriculture officer. And so we helped them learn that little bit more by trialing a new way of sending information down through the hierarchy. We also do this in the UK, in London, where I worked. I worked with London's government, and we did a policy that tried to get neighborhoods to be more coherent. You know, we have so much to learn from Ghana. Ghana has very, very strong neighborhood communities. London, unfortunately, it's very varied. And so we tried to learn from the Ghanaian example by trying to bring together communities at the street level. It made a difference by trialing new ways of doing it. And this has persisted because London's government learned from it. So what does all this mean? So you've heard me talk about what we do. We ask questions, get data, and we try to answer them in ways that nudge. We can't do everything. My managers will not listen to me on most things. But when I bring them evidence on that little moment where they need a little bit of help in making a decision, I can make them think a bit more along the lines of, well, actually, these are the divisions that need help, or these are the best ones. Let's go and learn from them, or this is a better way. I'm going to go to Alan's question in a second. So not only do I want you to think about who are the best NDAs, how do you know, and what can we learn from them? I want you to think about your work every day. Think about it's difficult the last 2 years, but just think about how your work changes. The work that you do. Did you decide strategically this was a better option for you today than yesterday? Is your work better? Is your work making better decisions today because of something you did yesterday? If not, then you could get to the end of your career and you never chose what your tomorrow looked like. So each of us have different places we can improve things. We also have kids, lots of responsibilities. It's hard to always comment and question and think, but take some specific area. And this is what we asked in the CSTC. We said to everyone, take one thing, take one process, take one aspect of your work and improve that tomorrow, so that you can answer the question I just asked you, how does your work change? Where you can say, yesterday I decided to change one thing, and this was strategic. I decided that was the thing that was most likely to be changed given all the responsibilities and constraints I had, and I did, I changed it. Or I tried to change it, and I'm going to make it better tomorrow. And there's some films in the invite to this seminar of Ghanaian colleagues making those changes in their work, small changes. but you can see they are happy. And I don't know, maybe we even have some of the people in their videos on this seminar, so thank you if that's you. But have a look at those videos. It's in the invite. And it's people who said, I wanted to change my tomorrow strategically. So let's quickly go to Alan's question here. How can we ask questions that are relevant in responding to the challenges faced by our ministries and departments? I don't quite understand the question, Alan. Could you come off mute and just explain to me, please? There may be something wrong with Alan's mic or his ability to come off mute. I think what he's asking is, what's the process by which you find out the right questions to ask?
Yeah, there's a problem with this mic. I just spoke to him. Alan, maybe you can explain it further by typing again.
Yeah, this is a great question, though. How do we get to the right questions? Because the answers, that's a very, very good question, if that's what you're asking. I think actually this is a good discussion point, and I really would like others to come in on it. So please start typing into the chat. What's your answer to that? The first thing is you need a unit like Madam Elizabeth's RCU and the Bureaucracy Lab underneath it. You need a place whose job is to go and collect those questions, because this isn't part of everyday public administration work. Yeah. So it needs to be in the TORs of your unit, but all of you need to try and push for you to have somewhere in your TORs, in what's written down, that you should be investigating how to improve your work. The US government only just did this. Literally this past year. This is globally the frontier. Why does public administration not ask these questions? This is not just in Ghana. This is everywhere. And so what they did is, in law, they put the following terms of reference. Every agency must have a document that states, these are my questions about policy. So what should school children do in the education sector? And also about my implementation, my ministry. How should I employ people? What unit should I have to make sure that I'm providing services to schools in the best way? They just passed that law 2 years ago. And this year, we're working with them, the US government. This year was the first time that every single agency had to put a document on their front page of their website that said, these are our big questions, both on policy and implementation. So the first thing is, it has to be in the terms of reference. The chief directors need to be asked to produce a one-pager that says, these are our questions. But that should be run by a unit like yours. There has to be a centralized unit. The Office of Personnel Management, I'm pointing at them, they are there. In fact, I could take my screen and instead of the atrium, I could walk over to their office. They are doing this work now, is then saying, what are the commonalities of question? So we need an office like yours to do it. But we also need the conversation to start. And the way that a lot of the conversation has started is they use their federal survey to identify problems. So how do we ask the right questions? Firstly, we have a process. But secondly is we prompt those questions by ensuring that there's a good survey of public officials about the challenges they face in their environment. So then when you're creating those questions, you can look at your survey data and you can say, I have some very dissatisfied employees. Why? That's my question. So how do we ask the right questions? We also have to have systems that start to collect data that nudge us towards the right questions, of which surveys are an important part. In your APRs, we should have every year a moment, a week, a day funded where the head of service, chief directors come and we say, why is your organization not performing? Again, Let's ask questions, not to criticize, but to inquire, to ask questions. And so we have put some ideas together from our discussions with the Ghana team. It seems in some sense copacetic with what we've just been talking about. To make civil servants self-sufficient to monitor and evaluate the performance of their divisions and teams is what we feel would be a good aim for the service. Exactly as Alan's just asked, how do we get to the right questions? Is we need to not just empower ourselves to ask the right questions, we need to empower the service, the chief directors, directors, and staff. To do that, we need to give them rigorous microdata, surveys on how satisfied staff are, on the bottlenecks they face. We need to improve the collection of administrative data. Hopefully some of the training we get here will do that. We need to generate capacity. We need to go and train. So another part of the RCU's work should be going and seeking out people who want to ask these questions and giving them the tools to do so. We should support innovation and experimentation. CSTC is a leader in innovative methods. You know, I will never forget my sessions when I was watching the CSTC trainers. They're fantastic. I get you know, global standards of training of where I am. And I can say CSTC has some fantastic trainers. Let's allow them to innovate, try new things. Let's expose the best of them. And then in the end, we have to improve the research and analytical capacity of the Ghanaian civil service, which I think is a huge part of what the RCU can do, plus all of your teams, but then also your civil servants. This needs to be a part of every day training. There should be, as you said, training of trainers. So the last hour that I've spoken, I apologize for speaking so much. This is my life. I believe in it, and Ghana has been a part of my journey. And so that's why I wanted to start by asking big questions of us all for you to then frame your own journeys. Another proverb, but it could have come from any part of the Bible. You must act as if it is impossible to fail. Do you know why? Because then you're aligning yourself to God. And I know this is a secular presentation, but I'm a religious person. I know a lot of people on this call are. If we get to the end of our professional careers and we didn't try to improve our workplace, right? How you know, there's a moment when every kid looks at their parent and says, well, what do you do at work? I do what other people tell me, or I try to improve the government of your friends, your family. I try to make things better. That's what I do. So you must act in a way that will improve things, irrespective of how hard it is. I have failed much more than I've succeeded, and yet we still make progress. Okay, so I'm going to let Adrian talk about homework, but I'm going to take a moment and now open up to your own thoughts, your own fears, which are as important to discuss as anything else, your own comments. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you for being amazing partners over the last 7 years. Thank you to Madam Elizabeth and the Chief Director at OHCS for forging a partnership that we can work with. Thank you to the whole of the RCU team. And to all the people on this call for allowing me to take a moment. I hope you are going to take seriously these questions because Ghana's future depends on it. So let me open up and hear some of your comments and thoughts.